In this tutorial, we will be extending our text chat application to include video chat. The video chat is going to be using the webRTC technology in order for both of our browsers to be able to share video peer-to-peer. Now, the webRTC technology is a little bit more newer, and it has different functionality across different platforms. So there can be different results depending on if you're on your phone, if you're not on your phone, and of course the browser that you're using. And definitely IE is not anything that you want to try to test this on. Now, webRTC.org has an extensive amount of resources, tutorials, documentation. The caveat about this is a lot of it is outdated. Some of it hasn't been touched since 2013 and 2014. There are some libraries out there where in this tutorial I am going to be using a library because it is going to just help us get this set up in the most, I guess, quickest way and least amount of errors. Now, if you do want to set up webRTC completely from scratch, just raw code, then you can definitely go to Mozilla and check out the documentation and type in RTC peer connection, and you will get information on setting this up raw. Like I mentioned, we will be using a library to get this set up. I do just want to go to their page where they list all of the information of what you can use to get this set up. But like I mentioned, a lot of these resources unfortunately are outdated. You can use commercial libraries that, do a lot of the work for you, but of course those are paid services, and you don't have as much ability to modify things, of course, if you are creating everything and hosting it yourself. So next, what I want to get into is just kind of explain a little bit more about how WebRTC works and how the browsers will connect to each other. So in order for WebRTC to work, the peers that want to connect to each other still have to connect to a server of some sort. And that is going to be a signaling server. Now, because most of us are going to be on private networks, our clients, our browsers need to be able to communicate with each other. And since we're going to be behind firewalls and NATs, then it's going to be difficult to do that. So before the connection can happen, the two clients that want to connect have to first connect to a stun server. And what that stun server is going to do is it's going to provide the clients back with ICE information. And ICE information pretty much is just network information about that particular client. So the stun server is going to provide like a public IP address and like UDP information, things like that. And your clients are going to use the public IP addresses that are provided from the stun server in order to talk to each other. And they're going to talk to each other on a signaling server. Now, a signaling server can be a variety of kinds. You can make your own, or you can use a commercial one, or you can use a library. But that is where all the information and the exchange is going to happen. What type of data the client can receive. Are they receiving audio? Are they receiving just video? Things like that. That type of communication are going to happen through the signaling server after the clients have already got their ICE information and ready to go. So on the screen, I just have some visuals, which is hopefully help you understand better what's going on, especially right here in this middle image, where we have the PC and the PC2, which is just actually peer connection, which they're breaking between that firewall to get to the stun server, and the stun server is providing them back with like public information so they can connect to each other. And our third image, it's just showing more of like a realistic view of what's going on. So we actually have real equipment, router, and the signaling server and the stun server, which would be hosted somewhere in-house or if you're using a company's service. So I have other visuals too, and even console log is going to show us some information, which better is going to help this make sense if it doesn't already. So also, if you would like to, you can take a look at the code lab on webRTC's site. It's going to walk you through setting up a video chat with just raw code and no libraries. But they did mention in there setting up a library, and I feel like the library is just the best way because it's more error proof, and it's quicker, and I feel like using the library is just kind of help better understand what's really going on. And I personally have chose to use PeerJS. There's other libraries that you can use out there as well. Commercial libraries where you probably have a trial and you have to pay for it, but this one definitely gave me some tools and showed me things that made sense to me as far as what is happening with webRTC and the peer-to-peer connection. So you can definitely try other libraries, but this is the one I'm using in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and continue building on our project. So we are back in our project, and if you wanted to make the video chat in a separate project, that's definitely up to you. You could just duplicate this project and make the modifications as far as just adding the video chat elements, but I'm going to continue off of this project. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create the area of where I want to show my video, which is my video and of course the remote video. And then I'm also going to have an input where it's going to be asking for the other person's ID in order for us to connect. So when we click a button that connects us, we can then click a button that will allow a call to happen, so then we can see each other's video. So what I'm going to do first is go to Bootstraps just so I can grab two divs and just get those set up, and the divs are going to wrap around two video elements, and one video element is for me and one video element is for the other client.
Since I'm already familiar with Bootstrap's documentation, I already know what I'm looking for. If you prefer to use a different front-end framework, definitely do so. For me, I'm going to go into their documentation, and then I'm going to go into their layout, then their grid section, and I'm going to grab that first div 3-column container section, and that's what I'm going to use to paste in my index file. So in my index file, I'm going to go ahead and just paste those divs in underneath the text chat area. I'm going to create a horizontal tag just to divide, and I'm going to paste those divs underneath that area. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just fix the format real quick. The next thing I'm going to do is just remove one of the divs because I'm only keeping two. And then I'm going to just adjust the column, the class column, just to also include medium and large screen sizes. And I want to make it even on the page. Now I want to include my video tags inside of the div. So I'm going to create them inside. One is going to be for a remote video, one will be for local. So I'm going to name the one class video, one class remote. And they're both going to be set to autoplay. Now on my local video, I'm going to change the R on the second video tag to L to be the local video. And I'm also going to say muted, so we don't need to hear ourselves talk. So what I'm going to do next is also get a input field, because that's where we'll enter the contact or the connect ID, and then a connection button to connect the two clients together, and then a call so then they can call. So I'm going to use the input that I have in my text chat. I'm just going to copy that input, and I'm going to paste it after the column divs, but still inside the container. And I'm going to change this input to be called con ID, because that's the contact field. And then it's going to say enter a connection ID. And then I'm going to just grab the button, and I'm going to also paste that underneath the input. And then I'm going to paste another button underneath the input. And the button ID for the first button is going to be the call button, or actually it's going to be the connection button. I'm going to just call this con button. And then the second button is going to be called call. And this is going to say connect as the text, call as the text. Now I'm going to change the color. So instead of primary for connect, I'm going to change that to success. And instead of primary for call, I'm going to change that to alert. Next, I'm just going to add some text in the remote div just for visualization. So I'm going to say remote. And then in the local div, I'm going to say local. Now I'm going to go in the front end and see what this looks like. All right, so my server is connected. I will go ahead and just do localhost. I thought my server was connected. I might have lied. All right, so remote here, local here. And as you can see, they're taking up, an even amount of space on the screen. Okay, so the call button should actually be a color. So just looking at what I did, I named this alert, and that's actually not a color in Bootstrap. So I'm actually going to change this to danger. Refresh. Okay, that's what I was looking for. So now the next step that we want to do is we want to now go ahead and set up our peer connection. So what we'll need to do is first install those dependencies. So I'm going to do a npm install, and I'm going to do peer and PeerJS. So PeerJS is the library that is using all the webRTC technology. So it's going to make it easier for us to build our connections. And Peer is just the server that PeerJS is using. So that's why you would need to install both. And then the Peer server does run off of port 9000. So keep that in mind when it comes to testing, that that's not a port that is being blocked. So where we set this up is we're actually going to set this up in our client server file, and I'm actually going to set this up underneath our socket code. Now, one thing that you can do is you can use socket.io also as a signaling server, but I'm just going to use Peer to do the signaling server for me because it just was easier for me to set it up this way and easier for me to understand what was going on. But using socket.io is an option as well. So here is PeerJS documentation. I think the documentation is okay. There's different ways that you can set up just the Peer server. You can set that up locally, or you can have it set up where it's pointing to the cloud. I'm actually going to set it up to point to their cloud, and that's going to be in the setup section here where it's telling you how to just set up the client. But if you do go to Peer server JS and go to the GitHub, it does tell you how to set this up locally, how you would do that, how you would even set it up if you're using Express. But I'm going to use their cloud. So underneath the chat is where I will set up the video chat. Now, I haven't been the greatest at leaving comments. So you do want to make sure that you are leaving detailed comments so you can still follow along with what's going on in the project. I'm just going to quickly comment out the steps that I want to make in order to get the peer connection up and working. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the local video and display it with permission. And then I'm going to then create a peer connection with the peer object. Then after I'm on our peer server, I'm going to display the peer ID on the DOM. So since that peer ID is displayed, we can take that peer ID and use it on another client. So when another client connects, they're going to go through the same thing and they're going to have their peer ID. So if we are going to exchange peer IDs, we do that with a on-click with the connection button. We're going to do we're going to expose our ICE information to each other. So then we are both connected and exposed. If I hit the call button, then we are going to send our offer and answer is exchanged. So then I'm going to ask to call. And then if I accept the call, then I'm going to display the remote and local video on the clients. So I will be creating a couple of functions, and I will be writing these functions the original way and not using arrow functions like I did in the text chat with the socket. The webRTC technology is newer, it's still in development. You know, as far as the documentation, there's just things out there that's not up to date. So I just want to avoid running into any errors and just stick to using functions the original way. So what I want to do first is I want to call a request to our media device. So I'm going to copy and paste a code snippet here. And this is something you could get off the mozilla.org website, or you can find it off Google. It's just out there. But this call, the navigator.getUserMedia, is going to request our camera. And then if we have permission to it, then we can tell it to display. So this code snippet also covers, you know, different browsers and mobile devices as well. And I just didn't want to type it out because it's redundant. But above it, I'm going to go ahead and create the function, and I'm going to call this get local video. And then it's going to accept some callbacks. And what's that going to do is when we do the navigator.getUserMedia, it's going to return a promise. So the callbacks is going to have our success and our error message there. I'm going to go ahead and open the function, and then I will end it. And then I'm going to say navigator.getUserMedia, and then I'm going to pull in some constraints. And constraints are just going to be properties about the media. And then I'm going to say callbacks dot success. And then I'm going to say callbacks dot error. So we'll need to make the success and error message, and we need to make the constraint. So first I'm going to make the constraints here above. And that's going to be an object, and it's going to have audio and video. So I'm going to say audio true, and then I'm going to say video true. You can add additional properties too, like height and resolution, but I'm just going to keep these two basics here. Okay, so now that we have that set up, I'm going to then make the function that's going to handle serving our video on the screen. Okay, so my next step is going to be creating a function so that the stream that we have, we can display it on the DOM. So I'm going to say receive, or I'm going to say function receive stream, and then I'm going to call in that stream we have as a parameter and then an element ID. And this is going to pretty much reference the video element ID that we created earlier. And then I'm going to say var video equals document dot get element by ID. I'm going to say element ID here for that parameter. And then I'm just going to go ahead and set the source object to that position. So we're pretty much placing the video in that element. So let's say source object equals stream. And then I'm just going to create a global reference of this stream. So to do that, you say window, and then you name it something else, stream. So pretty much this will be used to display our stream on the other person's browser. So now I want to call the function. So what we'll do is I'll say get L video, and then I'm going to pass in the arguments which are going to be two functions, which is our success and our error message for that promise. So I'm going to put this in as an object, and we're going to say success. And then the success is going to equal the function, and it will have the stream. And then we're going to create another global variable, and we're going to call this one local stream. And we're going to assign that to stream. So this can be available for our other peer when it's time to actually start sharing video chat. And then I'm going to say, and then I'm going to call in request stream. And that'll be our stream. And then I'm going to pass in the L video element that we created earlier. So that will get passed in where we have the element ID listed there. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and create the error for the promise. And this will say function, and then this will just have an error as the parameter. And we'll just put an alert. And then we'll just log it to the console with the error. Okay, now let's test this out and see if we can get our playback. All right, let's go ahead and go into a local host to see if we can get our video to show up. Okay, I'm gonna bring up the dev tools to take a look. Constraints is not defined. So I believe I named it constraints, so. Okay, so I do have a typo in my constraints variable. So I'm gonna just update that typo, and now let's check. Still not showing. Cannot set property source object of null at 55. Okay. Cannot set source property video element. Something wrong with my element ID. L video. Okay, so since I'm getting it by element ID, I made a mistake and named my video tag with a class. I need to just update this with an ID. I'm gonna update both video tags with an ID instead. And I believe that should fix it. You can keep class if you want to, but I'm referencing the ID. So now let's check. Awesome, now we can see our local stream. So now our next step is we're going to want to display a connection ID. So when the connection ID is displayed, we'll be able to enter it into the input here from a different client. And then when we connect, we'll pretty much be exposing our ICE information to both candidates, and then when we call, we'll pretty much be sending over our exchanging information, and that's when the webRTC part of it is also involved. All right, so I'm back into my text editor, and I'm going to begin creating our peer connection. I do want to go ahead and reference the library for PeerJS and what I'm doing to create this. So what I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to the Get Started section. I'm going to grab their script tag. I'm just going to reference all the PeerJS JavaScript. And then I'll go ahead and just paste this in my index file, and I'm going to put it above the client.js file. Next, I'm going to go ahead and then grab the peer object. So this is where all our peer connection and stuff would happen. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that in our client.js script. So as you can see in the next section, it's referencing how to display our peer ID. So I'm pretty much going to do it the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say peer.on, peer.on, and the event is called open. And then it's going to be a function with no parameters. And then I'm going to say document.getElementById. Now, one thing that I do recall is I actually didn't make a tag to pretty much place this peer ID. So I do need to make that. So I'm just going to leave the field blank for right now. And I'm going to say .innerHTML equals peer ID. So once we get our peer ID after the connection, we're going to display it somewhere in our DOM, but I need to create that space. I'm just going to save this for now, and then I want to display this above the input. So I'm going to actually just make a span ID and name this display ID. And I'm going to leave that empty, and then I'm going to go back to the client and type in display ID. Now we can test to see if we can see this display ID. So I'm going to go ahead and go into a local host so we can see the peer ID. And as you can see, the peer ID is showing up there on the screen. And what I'll do is do a new tab and start a second client that's joining in, and they have a peer ID as well. So we would take this peer ID and use it in our initiator's peer ID in that input field, and then we would connect. And on the connection, that is when pretty much the clients would pretty much just expose their ICE information, go through the stun process, stuff like that. And you could also have taken this peer ID and pasted it into the other client as well. So let's move forward. So I'm back in my text editor, and I'm just going to actually go to where our peer object is at, and I'm actually going to create a new variable named con and a variable named peer ID, because what we need to do is pretty much connect the two clients together once you paste one of those peer IDs in the input value. So here I'm going to actually do a peer.on, and this is going to be a connection event. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the connection that we have entered in, and it's pretty much going to assign that peer ID to the other peer ID. So we're going to say con equals connection, and then we're going to say peer ID, which is that global variable we created, equals connection dot peer. And that's going to be looking at the peer object there. It's going to be assigning it. So next, what I would like to do is do a document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to do that below here. So I'm going to say document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to say our peer. Oh wait, that's not our. I'm going to say get element by ID, and the ID element is con ID. I'm going to say con ID, and then we assign that value to the peer ID. And that's coming from up here. Okay, so I'm just gonna close this, and I'm just gonna put in a peer.on, and this is also too from documentation, and I'm gonna say error function error, and then I'm gonna say alert, and error has happened. That's what happened. And then I'm going to include with concatenating the error. Say console.log the error. So now I am going to go ahead and create the click event for that connection button, so they actually would join together. So I'm going to say document get element by ID, and let me see what I called button. So I called it con button. Then we'll do add event listener, and we're listening for the click event, and then we'll do a function. And inside of it is going to take that peer ID and assign it to the value of the peer ID that was entered in. So they're going to just exchange with each other. I believe this was named con ID, and then we'll say dot value. So now we'll make a condition that says, so if there is a peer ID, this is what I want to do, is I want to, so if there's a peer ID, I'm going to use the con variable, and I'm going to connect it to the ID that was entered in the input. So you do peer.connect and then peer ID, that variable recreated. And then I'm going to say else alert enter an ID. And then I'm going to say return false, so it stops. I didn't know why I said else. I meant return false, so it stops. So where I got this part of it from, the con.peer, I actually got that off of documentation. So there's a section here that tells you how to connect two peers together. So when we click, that's when the whole peer connection happens between the two clients exchanging information. So hopefully that made sense. Sometimes things are better shown than explained. So hopefully me showing you what happens makes sense. So I'm gonna go to the local host again. And I'm gonna bring up another client. So if you can see on the screen that the input field of this client is blank. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the peer ID. Then I'm going to go ahead and paste it into our initiator's peer ID. I'm going to go back to the second client, it's still empty. And then I'm going to go ahead and press the connect button. So if I look at the second client, oh, let me do that again, connect. So if I look at the second client, that initiator peer ID is filled in. So they're linked together. So then our next step would be that when we call, then the two clients are pretty much going to send in an offer and an answer of their ICE information and of their requirements, like, can I accept this video? Is this video too large? Like, does it match my codecs? Stuff like that. So if stuff matches, you can make the call. So we're going to ask if we can call you. We're going to accept it. Then here we'll be displaying the other video on the screen. So our next order of business is creating that call event, and I am getting this from documentation where when we do press that click button, or I mean that call button, it will fire off our call event. So I'm going back into our text editor and I'm going under the comment for click, and I'm going to say peer.on call, and then I'm going to do a function that has the call as the parameter, and then we're going to create another function, or excuse me, a variable that says var accept call. And then it's going to pretty much equal a prompt on the screen that's true or false. So the confirm is pretty much going to put up a prompt that says yes or no. So in our case, we're going to say, do you want to answer this call? So it's a Boolean. And then we want to go ahead and create our condition. So if we do accept the call, then what are we going to do? We are going to say call.answer, which is a part of the documentation. And we're going to say window.local stream, because this is pretty much set answering the call with our video that we initialized earlier. So then if we do have the call, or if we did get the stream, then we will say call.on stream, and that will be a function with stream param. And what we'll do is we're going to just pretty much store this stream as a global variable again. So dot peer stream equals stream. And then we'll call our receive stream function, and we're passing in the stream. And then we're passing in the ID, which is remote video. So if we do accept the call, then it's going to pass along our video to the other client. Now we can also do another event for close, and that's on the documentation.on close, that we destroy the video. So that's also a function. And what will it do? It will give us an alert that says the call has ended. But behind the scenes, it's just destroying the call and taking it off the screen. So then next, we will go ahead and do a else and say console.log call denied. So if we just said no, we didn't want to answer, it'll skip all those steps and just do the console.log call denied for us. So what we'll want to do next then is create the the function for clicking on the call and it looking at our call event. Okay, so moving along, I'm going to go ahead and add that event listener to our call button so then it can fire off our call event. So I'm going to say document.get element by ID, call button, dot add event listener, and we're listening for the click event. Take that function, type function correctly. And first I'm going to just console.log, see, calling a peer. Add concatenate to include the peer ID. And then I'm going to just also console.log the whole peer object so I can show you how it holds all of the ICE information and what it's passing along to the other client. And then I'll make another variable called var.call, and it's going to equal the peer.call event, and this is in documentation, and it's going to bring in the peer ID. Oops. I'm going to say peer underscore ID and the window dot local stream. And that was created earlier when we, give permission to our camera. And then I'm going to say call.on stream, call.on stream, and then it's going to take a function with the stream. That stream's going to be passed in. And then we're going to do window.peer underscore stream equals stream. And then we're going to call our receive stream event or function and then pass in stream and the R video ID, because that is where our remote video gets stored. So when we click on our button, it's going to log that it's calling, it's going to log the peer object, and then we're pretty much calling on to the other peer and exchanging that information. So if I bring up the documentation, I'll just quickly show you where this is coming from. So on the left-hand side is where we get our event from, our call event, and that's where we get our close event from as well. So all of this is just coming from the documentation, and how we connect it to, another client is through this, this method here, peer connection. So all this is in documentation. So let's go ahead and try to see if this actually works. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up two local environments. Okay, so I'm going to do localhost and localhost. All right. And just make the screen a little bit bigger. So I'm going to take the peer ID of the second one, and then I'm going to paste it into the initiator, which is our first caller. And then I'm going to say connect, and then I'm going to say connect, and then I'm going to make the call. Now, before I do that, I'm actually going to bring up the dev tools. And I'm going to bring up the dev tools on both clients. and then I'll bring them over once we press the call button. So I'm going to go ahead and make the call. So I pressed call, and now I'm going to bring over the dev tools to show you what's happening in the background. Alrighty, so in the dev tools, you can see that it's making that call to our other client, and then we are printing out the peer object. So you see under the connections here, and then the peer object, it has all of that ICE information that I was mentioning to you earlier. So if you wanted to set this up in a raw fashion without a library, then PC, the RTC peer connection, this is the like the methods and stuff that you would use to set this up. And you can find all the details for this on mozilla.org. It does go through setting it up in this fashion. And if you keep looking at the details, you see it's giving you all the SDP information, you know, things like that. So this is all of the details that needs to be sent over in order to do the connection. So I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out a little bit on the screen so we can look at the local video and the remote video. And before I actually accept the call, I am going to also just mute it because it'll make too much noise. Okay, so on the second local host, there is a blue dot there because you see it says this tab is using your camera or microphone. So if I go ahead and click on this tab, you can see that it's asking me, do I want to answer this call, which I put in that confirm prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and mute the audio, and then I'm going to accept the call, and we should be able to see the other client's video, which is still going to be the same thing on our screen. So I guess our next step would be to try to see how this works live, since this is just local. And just to reiterate that if you're using a mobile device, specifically an iPhone, there are some caveats with that because of how Apple develops their software. So it may not work on an iPhone. From my experience, I've seen it work on an Android device, but it hasn't always worked on every Android device. So there might be some compatibility things there, but it should work on, you know, a desktop. I've been using Chrome, but I believe this supports Firefox and Mozilla, and it doesn't support IE, so don't try it on IE. So I'm going to go into Heroku, and I'm going to go ahead and create an app so then I could push this to a Heroku app. So my app did successfully deploy to Heroku, and one of the things that I had to do was exclude the node modules from the app by putting it in a git ignore file, and that did build successfully doing that. So I will demonstrate the app live, and one thing about it is that as far as the app being live, for me, it's not going to automatically prompt for my camera permission because I've already given it permission. But if your browser is unsure of camera permissions, then it will prompt that before actually showing video on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and take that peer ID that's on our client. I'm going to open a second client. And I'm going to go ahead and paste the second client in our input, and then I'm going to hit connect. I do want to just bring up the dev tools because sometimes when we are going to ask to accept the video call, sometimes that doesn't get shown on the other browser, and that's just because the tabs have to be active. Otherwise, that prompt just automatically returns false and you never see it. So after connecting, I'm just going to go to the other client. I see that we're connected, and I'm going to do call here, and then on the first client, I'm going to do call. So you can see too in our dev tools, it's still giving us those peer objects. So on the other side, I do have the request. So before I actually accept it, I'm going to mute so the volume's not duplicated. All right, so that worked. As mentioned, if you do this on mobile, it may or may not work depending on your phone. I have an iPhone, so it doesn't work for mine, but I had people test on Android and it worked. I'm just going to look at the text part of it that I created beforehand and just verify that that is still working. So if I'm typing in there, we see Jay is typing. So you would probably want to just continue with this project by fixing up the styling. Maybe this should be two different projects and, just making the front end look a lot better. But this was definitely just about functionality. I do want to mention, of course, to add some comments to your code, more detailed comments than I did. I'm going to go back and add some comments. But this was pretty much a walkthrough of setting up a text chat through browsers and then doing video chat through browsers with webRTC and socket.io. So thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate any constructive feedback, and I'll see you in the next video.